To most of the galaxy, Earth's military was a bit of a joke, not a dangerous joke like the Jarnathi radiation fleets or the silent ghost armies of Vela 6. No, humans were more of a punchline. Their drills were too choreographed. Their soldiers followed rules. And worst of all, they used safety switches. That was the part that really got the galaxy rolling. "Why train warriors if you don't let them fight?" barked Warlord Sthek of the Kryn Empire. He watched footage of a human platoon engaging in what the Galactic Training Council called a Tier 1 integrated combat exercise, which was a fancy way of saying humans ran around in clean uniforms and yelled at each other while firing blanks. "Where is the blood?" another alien general asked. "Where is the death? Where is the rage?" "They're simulating restraint," replied an Earth diplomat, already regretting the sentence. The aliens burst into laughter. Restraint. What kind of species trained for war and practiced not killing? Every 5 cycles, the Galactic Concord held a live combat simulation. Not a real war, but close. A mock battlefield was constructed on a neutral moon, designed to test species coordination, tactics, and adaptability. It was the galaxy's most watched event after the interstellar cook-off and the great gas bag migration on Galactic 3. This year, for the first time, Earth had been invited. Sort of. The official memo read, "Human forces are welcome to participate in a non-obstructive observer capacity." Translation, "Come play war, but stay out of the real fights." The humans accepted, and they sent Unit Echo 7. On paper, Echo 7 was a multinational task force composed of elite Earth personnel with high training marks and perfect conduct records. In reality, it was the unit you sent when you wanted to look boring. Captain Reed Monroe knew it. He wore it like armor. While the other species landed dropships, erected banners, and gave rousing speeches about glory, Monroe's squad filed out of their unpainted shuttle in full gear, and dead silence. No cheers, no chants, just focus, and foam dart pistols for safety compliance. It was a setup. The other species were here to fight. Humans were here to be laughed at. Again. The exercise began at 0600 planetary rotation. 12 factions, mixed species teams, randomized terrain modules, simulated objectives. The goal? Capture and hold 3 command points, each point worth 5 units of Concord commendation. The highest scoring team would be declared galactically efficient, which meant prestige, bragging rights, and first pick at next cycle's war games. For Earth, it meant nothing, until things started going strange. At first, Echo 7 played their part. Slow movements, exaggerated call-outs, weapons set to non-lethal simpulse. They took light cover, died early, logged out with polite nods. The alien teams snickered. This is what they call elite? One Gathakian soldier even left a flower on a fallen human's helmet. Echo 7 said nothing, but they logged every movement, every camp, every supply route, every reload time. "Captain," whispered Sergeant Rao as they huddled under a rock ledge, "they're not even hiding their comm channels. They don't see us as a threat. They're not wrong. Not yet." Halfway through day 2, the Kryn led the scoreboards. Their melee squads had disabled 2 command points. The Tharan bioarmor platoons held the 3rd with spore mines and intimidation pheromones. Echo 7, dead last. 0 objectives, 2 kills, 20 deaths. They were being mocked on the Galactic broadcast feed. Clips spliced together with laugh tracks. One reel showed a human trooper tripping over a rock, on repeat, with captions, "Deathworlders," they said. Monroe watched it all, didn't blink, didn't frown, just flipped the safety on his weapon to live sim. The switch glowed red. Behind him, one by one, his squad followed suit. The safeties clicked off, and everything changed. The shift happened quietly. One Kryn soldier went missing from a forward patrol. No ping, no alert. Just gone. Then another. Then a Tharan scout returned, shaking, claiming he'd seen a human with dead eyes drag someone into a trench and vanish. "Impossible," said his commander. "Humans don't ambush." That was true when they were being watched. Now, they were hunting. By nightfall, Echo 7 had reappeared. Not officially. Just in the kill logs. One strike team wiped out. No visual feed. Another squad ambushed mid-reload. The reports came in shaky, panicked. Silent movements, impossible speed, cleared the whole team before the drone activated. The term ghosts started popping up on comms. Alien teams began tightening formations. Some requested withdrawal. And yet, no footage. Echo 7 didn't stream. They didn't gloat. They didn't leave survivors. Just whispers. And now, fear. Command finally ordered an audit. SIM data was pulled. Thermal readings flagged. What they saw made no sense. Echo 7 was moving in coordinated shadows, leapfrogging terrain, mapping blind spots, timing reload gaps across enemy squads and exploiting them within seconds. They used no formal weapons, just converted training gear. In one report, a human had disabled an entire Tharan squad with a shovel and duct tape. Another used a blank cartridge as a decoy to draw a sniper out of hiding. Captain Monroe sent a single transmission to Concord Command, requesting rules of engagement update, recommend reclassification, humans, live threat Tier 1. Concord officials laughed, until the Kryn Command Center exploded. Simulated, of course. No one really died. But that didn't make it less humiliating. The Kryn had never been overrun, especially not by a squad they'd dismissed as non-obstructive observers. By the final round, Echo 7 had captured all 3 command points. At once, no speeches, no threats, just silence, and a red safety light blinking off. When asked to explain their performance at the post-game briefing, Captain Monroe said, "You told us to play nice." So we did. And then? He shrugged. Then we stopped. The post-exercise debrief was supposed to be a formality, a few charts, some stiff applause, then drinks and commiseration between species who'd just spent 3 days fake killing each other. Instead, it felt like a war crimes tribunal. Captain Reed Monroe stood at the front of the chamber, arms behind his back, clean uniform unburned and immaculate. Behind him, the Echo 7 squad sat in perfect silence. Blank expressions, hands folded, no medals, no gear. The other teams weren't even pretending to be polite. General Vork Tool of the Tharan Council was the first to speak. "You violated simulation decorum." "We followed all parameters," Monroe replied, deadpan. "Your soldiers just weren't expecting us to stop smiling." The Kryn general stood next. "You ambushed our command line." "Yes." "You used psychological disruption tactics." "Yes." "You fought as if it were a real battlefield." "Isn't that the point?" Silence. One near diplomat murmured, "They turned off their safeties." A ripple of nervous muttering followed. Even the walls seemed uncomfortable. A Concord administrator, a long-faced Drolak with 5 medals and no spine, cleared his throat. "Captain Monroe, are you aware your unit was invited in an observer role?" "Yes, sir." "And do you believe you fulfilled that expectation?" Monroe nodded. "We observed. Then we adapted. Then we responded." "You escalated." "We adapted," he repeated. Someone muttered, "Earth can't be trusted." Another, "They held back on purpose." And someone else, quiet but clear, asked, "Was this a warning?" Monroe's eyes flicked toward the sound. He didn't smile, but he didn't deny it either. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Echo 7's performance triggered a cascade of terrified curiosity. Military academies rewrote tactical courses. Simulators were patched with human variable protocols. Pirate networks began whispering rumors. Don't raid blue flag freighters. They might be bored soldiers on a training run. The Galactic black market saw a surge in purchases for Earth-standard foam dart weapons. Turns out those could be lethal in the wrong hands. Everywhere you looked, species were asking the same questions. How long have humans been hiding this? If that was just a drill, what does war look like? Why do they even need safety switches? The worst question. What happens when they turn everything off? Inside Earth's Lunar Defense Headquarters, General Satoshi Mendez watched the debrief feed with an unreadable expression. He sipped his black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just like Earth's approach to conflict, bitter and direct when necessary. A junior officer stood beside him, awkward. "We're receiving, messages. Threats, compliments, and invitations. The Kalari want to co-train. The Tharan are offering alliance drills. The Gathark just sent an edible wreath and a knife." Mendez didn't look up. "That means respect." "I thought so, sir." "Anything from the Concord?" "They're asking if we'd be open to setting training limits in future events." Mendez finally looked up. "Training limits?" Yes, sir. A long pause. Then he leaned back and chuckled. Now they're asking for our safety switches. Monroe and Echo 7 were pulled from public view. Not demoted, not promoted, just moved. Reassigned to a classified internal unit with no public briefings and no official insignia. But everyone knew. They became a phrase, a warning, a placeholder in strategy sims. What if Echo 7 appears? AI battle scenarios updated with variables named Monroe Maneuver and Rao Rotation. At least 4 alien races attempted to replicate human training protocols. None succeeded. Turns out, it wasn't the drills, it was the mentality. The Kryn High Warlord convened an emergency war council. Earth is dangerous, he growled. They wear smiles like armor. They laugh with their fangs hidden. They are unstable. No, said another. They are regulated. A long silence. Then, what if that wasn't their final form? And somewhere in that same galaxy, a human engineer was probably arguing with a combat AI over whether safety toggles should be red or grey, because color coordination matters. Back on Earth, Monroe stood on a cliff overlooking a simulated field, the same training zone used by Echo 7 for 6 months prior to the exercise. Neera Rao walked up beside him, tossing him a bottle of water. Still thinking? They don't get it. They will. I'm not sure they want to. She sat down next to him. You know, we could have wiped the board on day 1. I know. Why didn't we? He took a long sip, then answered, because the only thing scarier than power is restraint. That line leaked. Nobody knew how. Somebody with an earpiece or a drone mic or a satellite in the wrong place. But within a week, it was a headline. The only thing scarier than power is restraint. Human commander speaks. It was translated into 46 languages, tattooed, quoted, analyzed, and misunderstood. Because the galaxy still didn't fully grasp what humans were. And worse, they'd only seen us on our best behavior. One small moon in the fringe sector made the mistake of raiding an Earth colony. No big weapons, just a local group of mercenaries, tired veterans, exiles, a few opportunists. They assumed humans were unarmed settlers. They were half right. What they didn't realize was that the colony had a recreational militia, mostly retirees, some with old gear, old uniforms, the kind who trained on Sundays for fun, the kind who'd been waiting to be underestimated again. Only 2 survivors limped away. They didn't speak for days, just kept whispering, no safeties, no fear. They laughed while they hunted us. And back on Earth, training continued. Not with fire, not with war, just with precision, with drills, with switches set to safe. But every soldier, every unit, knew exactly where that switch was, and exactly when to turn it off, just in case the galaxy ever forgot. That humans don't fight because they love war. They fight because someone always assumes they won't. It started on the edges. The Erecti Expanse, a region known more for smugglers and solar storms than military strategy, lit up in a wave of silent transmissions and sudden disappearances. Then came the mining colonies. 4 gone in a week, no survivors, no footage. Then a listening post went dark. Then a Concord envoy ship. By the time the reports reached Central Command, it wasn't a skirmish, it was a war. But no one knew who started it. No declarations, no flags, just erasure. Entire facilities gone. The Concord panicked. Their fleets were trained for show force, their weapons polished for inspection. Their soldiers practiced ceremonial formations. They weren't ready for ghost war. Someone had found a way to fight without being seen, without honor, without code. Someone who didn't care about the scoreboard. And so, with reluctance, and more than a little fear, they called Earth. Earth's response was brief. 3 words. Send the coordinates. General Satoshi Mendez didn't brief the press, didn't parade troops, didn't even issue a formal declaration. He just picked 1 unit, Echo 7, still classified, still unofficial, still unrecognized in most Concord databases. They arrived in orbit over Site Echo 1, one of the last known contact zones in the Expanse. The Concord liaison, Ambassador Vela Carr of the Tharan Assembly, met them at the landing pad. He was nervous, trembling slightly, though his species lacked pupils. You came armed. Monroe stepped off the ramp in full gear. No point showing up dressed for peace when peace is already dead. We were hoping for restraint. You called the wrong squad. Echo 7 didn't wait for backup, didn't wait for clearance. They scouted the ruins of the mining colony in total silence. No music, no lights, no broadcasts, just infrared sweeps and gut instinct. Sergeant Rao knelt beside a melted wall panel, ran her gloved fingers along the edges. "This wasn't plasma," she said. "It was acid." Lieutenant Hughes ran a DNA scan on the residue. Nothing matched, no known species. But the degradation? Too precise, too clean. "Someone's removing their fingerprints," he muttered. "Then we need to leave our own," Monroe replied, and clicked his safety to off. First contact was messy. The enemy didn't speak, didn't broadcast, didn't try to intimidate. They just appeared, lurking, silent, dripping black armor, reflective plates, multi-limbed and fast. They moved like water under pressure. Most Concord teams would have tried diplomacy, maybe a scan, maybe a posture test. Echo 7 opened fire before the first one blinked, and the thing bled data, literally. Its skin ruptured into cascading code, warping signal space, blinding sensors. But the humans didn't use sensors. They used eyes and instinct and brutal precision. The first squad fell in 8 seconds, no warnings, no survivors, just one message left behind, etched in plasma on a broken wall. "They're not drills anymore." The Concord didn't believe the initial report, not because of the damage, but because of the kill count. 7 Echo 7 operatives, 65 hostiles neutralized in a single hour, no casualties, no injuries, one gun jam, resolved with a boot and some profanity. "Impossible," said a Concord analyst. "No," said Ambassador Velikar. "I saw their drills." He paused. "And then I saw the moment they stopped pretending." The enemy began adapting. They sent decoys, doppelgangers. They mimicked human voices, tried psychological attacks, images of family, audio feeds spliced with screams from old Earth wars. Didn't work. Echo 7 didn't carry comms anymore. They used hand signals and eye contact. They hunted in threes. The rest flanked from the dark. By the end of the second week, the enemy stopped mimicking and started retreating. One transmission was captured, fragmented, translated, a single phrase. "Do not engage units marked with the fire mark. They are not bound to rules. They come without mercy." And below that, an image, a stylized Earth military patch, red, cracked, no symbol, just a toggle switch flipped to the right, and under it, safety off. Back in Concord High Command, panic turned to policy. They issued a directive: do not antagonize Earth. They rewrote the rules of engagement. Assume all human units are live combat capable, and most importantly, they stopped laughing. No more jokes about human drills, no more smirks at foam dart soldiers. Now they spoke carefully, politely, like civilians walking past a sleeping apex predator, because they knew Earth had been holding back. And now, the galaxy had finally seen what happened when we stopped. They learned fast. The enemy, whoever they were, stopped throwing raw waves at Echo 7. They studied, adapted. The next encounter was different. It wasn't silent. It was familiar. Sergeant Rao was the first to notice. Her unit entered an abandoned outpost on LZ-17. It was quiet, too quiet. Power still running. No signs of struggle, no broken walls or vaporized bulkheads, just uniforms, Earth uniforms, laid out with care, folded, crisp, exact matches for Echo 7, even the name tags, even hers. She stood frozen, staring at her own face reflected in a cracked visor on the table. Then the lights flickered, and they came in. It was an ambush, but not like before. The enemy now looked human, moved like them, spoke like them, in perfect mimicry. Captain Monroe arrived mid-engagement. He watched one of the enemy agents scream, "Friendly," then twist mid-motion and snap a Concord trooper's neck with surgical grace. Echo 7 adjusted instantly, switches off, protocols abandoned. It was war now, no simulation, no rules. They fought like wolves among ghosts. The enemy matched them beat for beat, but they lacked something, instinct, because the enemy copied tactics, but not improvisation. They didn't have gut reactions. They had scripts, and Earth doesn't fight with scripts. It took 6 hours to clear the outpost. No Echo 7 casualties. But everyone walked out angrier, not just because the enemy copied their uniforms, not just because of the voice mimicry, but because the enemy had used human tactics. Without conscience, they didn't fight to win, they fought to consume, to break, to erase, and they wore humanity's face while doing it. Captain Monroe stared at the burned-out barracks for a long time, then issued a new standing order. No more mercy, no more safeties. We end this. The Concorde caught wind of the escalation. They pleaded for moderation. "We can't allow Earth to act with unchecked aggression," said one ambassador. "They're wearing your face," Monroe snapped, "and you're worried about tone." A diplomat replied carefully, "But isn't that what makes you human? Restraint." Monroe leaned in. "We showed restraint. For centuries. You mistook it for weakness. Now we show judgment. And there's a difference." That quote made it onto posters and tattoos, and one war monument on a fringe moon where the last mimic tried to scream for help in a human accent and was met with silence. Then fire. Neera Rao began compiling footage, not for propaganda, not for press, just for record. She clipped together every moment. Echo 7 disabling a mimic using an old Earth bayonet tactic last used in 1923. Private Laney laughing as he reprogrammed a field drone with a screwdriver and chewing gum. Captain Monroe walking through a burning trench, helmet under one arm, dragging an enemy beacon behind him like a leash. But it wasn't all violence. She also included the moment Sergeant Voss covered a wounded alien child with his own jacket, the way Hughes stayed behind to drag out an unconscious Concorde trooper, despite orders to evacuate, the soft, quiet voice of Rao herself saying over comms, "We are not monsters, but we know how to fight them." That footage never aired, but it spread, privately, and it scared the enemy more than the fire did, because they saw something they couldn't copy: conviction. By the final push, the enemy retreated to a planet made entirely of stone, cracked, bleached white, airless, no life, just bunkers and spires rising from the rock. Echo 7 called it the Pale. They descended with no ceremony, no fleet, just a dropship and a list of names. The final war took 36 hours, no survivors on the other side. Echo 7 stood at the center of the final outpost, surrounded by the enemy's broken symbols, mirrors, speakers, blank slates. A mimic approached Monroe, crawling, wounded, bleeding. It spoke in his own voice. "Why fight? We only became what you are." Monroe kneeled. "No. You taught us war. We taught you rules. You chose war." Then he switched off the last safety and ended it. Back on Earth, there was no parade, no medals, no declarations, just silence. Because the galaxy had changed, and it wasn't because of Earth's power. It was because they saw, finally, that humanity could win without joy. That fire, for us, is never the goal. It's the warning. And that restraint isn't weakness. It's mercy. And it can be withdrawn. The war was over. No one declared it. No treaty was signed. The enemy was simply gone, erased like bad code. The mimic fleets, the black-armored ghosts, the echo voices, they stopped. What was left was ash and memory, and a warning, not spoken, not broadcast, just understood, like heat before the burn. Echo 7 returned to Earth in silence. Their dropship touched down outside an old field base. No crowds, no press, no ceremony. Just a stretch of wind-worn concrete and a familiar sky. The first thing Captain Monroe did? Take off his helmet and breathe. Then he walked until he found the old rusted weapons rack by the training yard. He placed his sidearm on it and left. No one said a word, not even Neera. Some switches, once flipped, don't turn back. But the galaxy still buzzed. Not with mockery, not anymore. Now they asked real questions, terrified questions. What else have they hidden? If that was restraint, what's aggression? How long were they holding back? The Concorde opened emergency discussions, new rules of engagement, revised diplomacy protocols. One council member even proposed an Earth clause, a line in every treaty that reads, "Do not engage in combat simulation with Earth forces unless you enjoy losing teeth." It passed unanimously. Even the Kalari voted yes. Meanwhile, across colonies and fringe stations, murals appeared. Not of fire, but of a switch. Just a small red toggle. Sometimes painted under children's bunkers, sometimes over airlocks. Always the same message. Don't make them flip it. A journalist tried to get a quote from Monroe, found him sitting alone outside the Echo 7 barracks, feeding birds. The reporter approached carefully. "Captain Monroe." He didn't look up. "I'm off duty. I only have one question." He sighed. "Go." "What did you learn?" Monroe threw a few more crumbs, watched the birds fight, then calm, then said that we didn't need to win like that, but they made us prove we could. The journalist blinked. "Are you proud of it?" Monroe looked at him then, really looked, and said flatly, "I'm proud we turned the switch off again." That became the story's final headline. They didn't want to burn the galaxy, they just needed to show they could. It circled every Concorde channel, and everywhere it went, the message landed. Earth didn't start fights, but if provoked, they ended them, and then went home. Years later, cadets at alien academies were shown footage of the war, simulations of Echo 7, tactics, patterns, but they were warned. These are not normal humans. These are the ones they only send when you laugh. And still, some cadets did laugh, until they heard what happened next. In a dusty outpost near the Expanse, an Echo 7 memorial stood. Not a statue, not a plaque, just an old switch, painted red, mounted in silence, and above it, one line carved in steel. "We gave you our drills, you asked for our war. Be glad that's all we gave.